Okay, welcome everyone. This is the Community and Economic Development Committee. I'm John Weddleton.
Dick Crane.
Felix Rivera.
I'm David Chemick. I'm the landlord for the cultivation facility.
Elijah Goodfarm, Collaborative Department.
Francis McLaughlin, Planning Department.
Andy Honest, Clerk's Office. Amanda Moser, Clerk's Office.
Jebediah Smith, the Alcohol and Marijuana Control Office. Ryan Yell, Planning Department.
Sue Nolan, West Fireway.
Old School Buffy LLC.
Buffy Jones at Old School Buffy LLC. Colleen Baker Joint. Chris Hutcher, RC2.
Thanks.
She's at her cabin until Saturday only, and then you stay here tomorrow. She's at. I don't know, I'm building one, so hopefully it's not that bad, you know?
Yeah.
Okay, so first up is Cloudberry Partners. These are you guys. And this is Francis.
Yep.
And we'll let Mandy go through the licensing.
So Cloudberry, this is the cultivation. We had a retail last week. All of the licensing condition or requirements were addressed in their operating plan. I didn't have any taxes, fees, or fines found due by any of the licensees or affiliates, and there weren't any extra conditions recommended.
All right, thanks. Any comments?
So small room, it should be in your area.
For that building, Francis.
Hi, so Cloudberry's cultivation application, cultivation facility applications before you now. At your last meeting, you approved the retail establishment. The two cases are companion cases. They match, their floor plans match. This cultivation facility is on Spenard Road and would have 4,537 square feet of cultivation area. The front part of the building is the retail establishment. The back half of the building is the cultivation facility. The applicant has already begun the building permitting process. The two cases, the one approved last week and this one, have the same conditions of approval and the same floor plan. With the condition to upgrade the electrical service associated with the cultivation facility. The surrounding land uses are on Spenard Road, directly north of this property is a street, and then Yak and Yeti. Across Spenard Road is the Carousel Lounge and a vacant lot. And then Taproot is the next lot down on Spenard Road on the other side of Spenard Road. And then directly to the south of them is Bridget North Electrical contractor service, something like that. And then behind them is a VFW. So those are the surrounding uses. And the planning department, they've established non-conforming rights for most of the, or all of the characteristics of use. They meet the parking requirements. There was a condition of approval, I believe, to speak to the traffic department about the location of the dumpster. They've shown the dumpster on the site plan, and they just need to prove up that the waste service provider can make the turn to pick up the trash in the location that they've shown. Otherwise, this has been, my review, it's been pretty typical of other approved cultivation facilities.
Good, thank you. Any questions? I had a couple things. Not this bad, but it looks like what we saw on the retail, your dumpster on the retail one showed in a different location than it is on this one. So you guys kind of in a hurry change stuff? I know it's always an ongoing thing.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure. From what I'm aware of, we've gone through a couple of different designs. But I think the one there, looking in the front, is what we're trying to get through with the traffic.
Just a small thing, just from my experience being in the north of Spenard, you have a very small dumpster. Are you solid waste services or Alaska Waste? Solid waste. Mine is plastic and it and solid waste services recommended, you were gonna build it, you were gonna do what you did for plan on it. And they said, oh, don't do that, we'll just roll it on. And it works really great. Great. There is, staff report, says 4,537 square feet. In case 10, it says 4,472 square feet. Is it, we pick one.
Yeah, I didn't want to start off by talking the details, but the square footage and the floor plan we minor changes several times through the course of our review. So their initial application that you can look in the packet with their signature and all of that has one number. The floor plan has a different number. The latest floor plan, the latest floor plan and site plan is the correct one to work from, and my staff report echoes that. So I'm using the square footage for cultivation that is shown on the drawings, which is the most current, up to date, and it differs slightly from the number that they put on their application. And it's because we wanted to keep them on track, and we just allowed them to sort of pull out the old site plan and introduce the new one when they had new information and updated their site plan.
So yours, staff report is the
correct.
ruling number
Yeah.
as they go forward.
Yeah.
I don't remember in the retail this discussion of the pedestrian walkway. Was that part of the retail review too?
Sharon's case consolidated two conditions of approval. I broke it out into two different ones, but it was based on the exact same comment from the traffic department that said, provide the pedestrian walkway and work out the dumpster location.
So that would be not from Spinard Road to the main door. It's from like the retail door wrapping around to the entry to the cultivation.
No. Well, I think that they would. It's one building. I think that I wanted my conditions of approval to carry forward everything that the traffic department commented, and this site in this one building is only required to provide one pedestrian walkway from the main entrance to the street, and that would be from the retail. So, an argument could be made that you would drop it from this, but I just wanted the two cases to be extended either.
No, I would agree. When I was reading it, it seemed to me sounded like it was from the connect that front round. What's your understanding of it?
The original our first architect drew in this pedestrian pathway. Actually, we noticed on the site plan, so it's kind of followed forward.
just for the record, Pete Peterson showed up about 10 minutes ago.
Yeah.
5 minutes ago. Okay, and you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I was just going to ask Francis, are they required to have these sidewalk or not, or it's too soon to tell, or?
I'm trying to remember, I did my analysis, about a month and a half ago, so I'm just trying to remember. The site plan showed a pedestrian walkway, and so sort of offered it up. I recall that a new business is required to have pedestrian connection from the main entrance to the street. But they have non-conforming rights for the site, so that's the little wrinkle. They are very, very likely going to have to make site upgrades out in the parking area, and there's limited space to do that. And so one of the required 10% of total project costs that they will have to do, they'll have to come up with some sort of improvements to or upgrades to move in the direction of conformance with current code for characteristics of use. That's things like landscaping, the pedestrian walkway from the main entrance to the street. I think those are usually the ones that people go to for site upgrades to move in the direction of conformance because they're a little bit easier and a little bit more flexible. Right now the site has no landscaping and no pedestrian walkway. That's very likely the improvement that they'll end up doing. So yeah, let me look it up to see if
The parking lot's already asphalt, is that correct?
It's
partial.
Partial. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Yes.
Bill, I see in February they requested power, go to 3-phase 600 amp. When will that happen?
The process for that usually, I don't speak on behalf of the applicant, usually folks wait until they get their approvals before they make the investment. And I don't know what your plans are, but that's a pattern we've seen in the
What's
past.
the time frame we're talking about once they get the money to you guys?
I think
Weeks or months or what?
weeks. Yeah, no, it's, what they're looking at is that big, and it's the kind of equipment we ought to have in stock. So,
And they don't have to bring the three-phase too far, it's really already fairly close?
I can't say for sure, but that's a pretty industrialized neighborhood.
There's 3 bays in on the south corner, and we would be bringing it north. So it's 100 feet with the hall on our land.
Okay, anything else? Francis, you're looking for sidewalk info?
The following walkway shall be provided where one walkway fulfills more than one walkway connected to the primary entrance. The walkway shall connect the primary entrance to the abutting primary street frontage, except where the proposed walkway connections and alternative street frontages will have been directed to equal or better than the pedestrian access. I think it's applicable in all cases. I just can't think, I can't recall, because they have non-conforming rights for everything, whether or not this, the change of use requires it. Ryan, do you recall off the top of your head whether or not, because I think every one of the cases that I've had has ended up with a pedestrian walkway like Prairie Herbery. I think it's just required that they do it when they go from this vacant building, grandfather rights, to this new use.
It would be required unless they were within non-conforming rights for lack of pedestrian access, but that's where that bringing characteristics into conformance comes into play.
Yeah.
The project costs are 50%, most likely that desired improvement is going to be pedestrian access.
So at the end of the day, when we had a prelim with the building permit, we talked to them about site improvements that they would need to make as part of bringing characteristics to use of the conformance, and said it would be needed. And we had sort of a hard discussion about that. And the planning department sort of negotiates what site improvements would be, and like one of the highest priority ones is the pedestrian connection with traffic, the location, dimensions, of the pedestrian walkway, provide proof to traffic that the location of the dumpster is acceptable to the provider, and that's it. So, we'll need to look at the budget and then review this. With these conditions of approval, they will be required to do the pedestrian walkway no matter what. But, planning department's comfortable with this.
You guys okay?
Yeah, that's kind of what I remember from the meeting, was it sounded like from what we're planning to do for renovations, that pedestrian walkway towards Spinard was what I recall.
Well, the pedestrian pathway that's shown on the site plan goes to the rear of the building. The pedestrian pathway that Francis is talking about, I guess, goes to Spinard Road. Two different pathways.
Okay, that's where I think my confusion.
Yeah.
So and then as I say, the concern that the traffic had with the pedestrian pathway noted on the site plan is that the width of the vehicle has to, from Spinard Road to the rear parking area, not that great, and if you were to put a 5-foot pedestrian pathway in there, you're creating traffic.
That was for the old one, the one that before.
Well, that would work temporarily. It's not clear on the conditions that are being spoken of here, what the pedestrian pathway we're speaking of. So I think it's important, as I say, we are not both agreeing to the pedestrian pathway shown on the site plan. We wouldn't be agreeable, or agreeable, I am agreeable to the pedestrian pathway in Spinard Road, assuming it won't block traffic.
Okay. So what David said is correct, and I think I'm sort of recalling this now. They've shown a pedestrian walkway on the site plan, and traffic just wants to look at the dimensions of that, whether or not the pass-through works. That's basically you can't park a car right up against the building anymore. It's supposed to be separated by a sidewalk, so the bumper of your car doesn't actually park up against the building anymore. There's now a sidewalk, and that's the current design. This building doesn't have that. They've shown that they would provide it. What I did in the condition of approval, which was good, was to add the word resolve with traffic. So it was resolve with traffic, the location, dimensions, the pedestrian walkway. So they've shown it, we carried forward as they were going to do it, but they would resolve with traffic, whether or not it actually works and still allows, fire trucks to come into the site and allows sufficient space for cars to come and go. So where I said that, the walkway had to do with bringing characteristics, use into conformance, that actually just stands on its own. It says provide a cost estimate and then resolve whether or not you need to do any characteristics of use improvements. The one that they could do was the pedestrian walkway out of the site. Another one that they could do would be to provide this walkway along the side of the building so that parking isn't up against the building anymore. So the word resolve with traffic leaves the flexibility to do it or not do it. I sort of kicked the can down the road because I wanted some of this to be resolved at the staff level with the building permit. Because when they started this process with their site plan before the assembly, they hadn't begun the building permit process. When the applicants begin the building permit process, before they come to the special use permit, then they've got fully designed architectural plans, these things are worked out. In this case, they started the special land use first, and they followed up with the building permit, and that's when we learned some of these other things. Through my review, we put them in touch with building permitting. So they're working them out. They've got a lot to do, but they're working them out. I think that the conditions of approval with the word resolve allows them the maximum flexibility to sort this out, and they would not have to provide this at all if the puzzle pieces come together and they don't have the space. But it is something that you could end up providing as a way to bring characteristics of use into performance, which we almost know you'll need to do.
I'm comfortable.
I was just wondering, Chairman, if there's a sidewalk along that side of Spinard Road, or
Yeah.
there is?
Yeah, the sidewalks along both sides of Spinard Road in that location.
So there could be some foot traffic, so that would make sense to have a sidewalk. Thank you.
Thanks. So what are we gonna do?
Move approval.
Second.
Any opposition? Okay, well, you've been through this before, so the committee will recommend on Tuesday that, for approval. We'll see what happens.
Still need to attend the meeting, because there's 11. You never know.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so next up is, Old School and Buffy, so you're welcome to sit up here.
No, I'm good.
Okay, Mandy?
So this is Old School and Buffy cultivation license. The licensing requirements have all been addressed in their operating plan. There were no taxes, fees, or fines snapped due by any of the licensees or affiliates. And there weren't any conditions recommended to be placed on the license.
Okay, thank you. And Sharon?
Yes, this is Old School in Buffy. Applying for special land use permit for marijuana for, as Mandy said, a cultivation establishment. They are located in an I-1 district, and in fact, they're actually, according to the 2020 comp plan, they're located in an area that's an industrial reserve, so it's ideally situated in that sense. The site is occupied by 3 warehouse condominium buildings. Old School and Buffy will occupy building number 3, Unit 5 on the south half of Lot 4. Unit 5 is currently vacant and has 1,250 square feet. However, less than 500 square feet of that space will be used for cultivation. The business will operate from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 7 days a week, although it will not be open to the public as the cultivation facility. The applicant has presented at the Bayshore Clad Community Council. They meet their parking requirements, and they meet all the other standards for minimum lot size and lot coverage, setbacks, and height restrictions. The main issue with this particular license is that Old School and Buffy, they're leasing the space, one of the condominium units. The owner of the space has recently, over the last year, developed the site. However, they have an open CCO. They haven't completed it. There are a list of things that they need to do and haven't done, and that list is on page 11 of your packet. There's an inspection report done for the site, and there's are 8 outstanding items that they need to do and haven't done, and actually their CCO is now expired. So it has nothing to do with Old School and Buffy. They're simply leasing a space, but I believe Old School and Buffy, Mr. Morgan has been in contact with the building owner, letting them know that that this may affect his ability to get a license because the site has an expired CCO. Other than that, the planning department have no issues with it. In fact, the only condition is number 6, which is to resolve the open land use permit with development services.
Okay, thank you. Any questions?
Some of the things on the list have been done. I've got pictures here. It was just striped last week. This is in front of my unit. The only thing on this list of 8 things that has anything to do with my unit would be the curb stops in front of those 2 parking spots. And I'm willing to put those in. These other things, the enclosure around the dumpster, these things should have been resolved in 2015. And now it's affecting me. I paid 13 months of the lease in this building. And now to stop me from opening because the landlord has an open CCO, it's kind of penalizing the wrong coming up on the assembly, because, I mean, what I've been told is if he doesn't do it by August, they're going to come and do some things for all 4 buildings, because this should have been resolved. He's the good old boy club, okay, he owned that whole corner forever. And squeaky wheel gets the oil. I mean, I've done everything I can besides park outside his house, and you know, if you look at the list, the 8 things on the list is a couple months rent, and I paid 13. Could cover everything on the list. And you could get it done with a phone call if you wanted to.
So where does this leave them?
Well, they have to get it resolved. It may affect it. I mean, Mr. Morgan has, striped it, so that's one thing off the list. It's, I think Mr. Morgan is working to resolve it with the owner by legal means if necessary. It may come to that. Mr. Morgan has a lawyer in waiting to see what comes of this meeting, and we'll proceed down that path.
So, the guy who owns this property has a CCO, but he just doesn't do the
Yeah,
conditions.
he
doesn't
never
read
came
them.
in to finish it off or do the work on site.
So he has no real right to even lease them, because no one's allowed to be in them until he's done those things. So
Correct.
he's kind of jumping
Yeah.
the gun.
Right. So, I mean, I will go and talk to the the code enforcement officer who did this report and see what their next step is, what they're planning to do. But Mr. Morgan may have already researched that, and apparently he has until the end of August.
According to this, that they have extended the CCO on the as-built until 8/31/17. And I was told by traffic that if this wasn't resolved at this date, that they were going to come shut the building down. We spent, and the reason it's August 31st, because September 1st, nobody has to pay rent. And if he loses 10 units of a lease per month, he'll spend a couple $1,000 to put these, because I've been to many of these meetings, and there's been many things that are way more difficult than wheel stops and a surround around the dumpster. I mean, these are insignificant things to everybody except me, because it's stopping me from opening.
But it's stopping you from opening. Is that right?
Well, it's until August 31st. The owner has the opportunity to correct these things. It's a matter outside our control. We're in a situation that's.
My build out is done. I've got all the architectural, structural, electrical, mechanical, all the permits have been signed off, approved, ready to go. If I'm approved on Tuesday, within days, I could be bringing plants in and start. I've been at this 13 months. You were at my community council meeting, Mr. Wells. I mean, we've been struggling hard to get open.
I wondered where you've been all this time. It's been well over a year. And I can see you had to revive it. So you're saying your building is ready. You have all the equipment there to grow plants and so on. Ready to go, but they can't start until the landlord does his job.
Yeah.
Even if we approve this license.
Well, I'll have to double check, but I mean, the whole site has an expired CCO. It is an awkward and unfortunate situation.
Well, it's extended though. So I mean, is it possible?
Well, I think the as-built has been extended. The as-built provided. So I will go and find out what code enforcement is doing on this, and what date they have given, and what letters they've written to the owner, and find out what the latest status is on this. I was hoping, in talking to Mr. Morgan, that the owner of the site was going to, knowing that Mr. Morgan was coming forward with his issue, was going to go out and take care of the things on the site, but it still looks like he's reluctant to do it.
I've realizes that legal action is gonna be taken because I can't open my door, then he will do these couple $1,000s worth of remedies, and the problem will be solved sooner rather than later. I mean, that's my hope. I can't say what he's gonna do, but I hope that should occur.
So, thanks, Mr. Chairman. So you don't think he has changed his mind, got cold feet about having a marijuana
Oh,
establishment?
no. In fact, his son has leased another unit in the same complex and is gonna cultivate.
I see.
So, I mean, it's,
If your attorney indicated we approve this, it'll give you better legal standing.
yes.
Because it's not your fault, but I don't want this guy to get away with not doing these corrective actions to get his permit. I hate to see you start this and be told you can't go in your own building.
Is there some mechanism where, like, if he's ready to go, so if we approve the license, and it sounds like the terminology is different, but if the CCO has been extended, then he can be allowed to risk, go ahead and start your operation, assuming that by 8/31 your landlord would have done everything. But if you risk, if he doesn't, then you're shut down. But maybe, it's kind of your choice to make. Is it possible to do something like that? This is actually to Sharon.
This is the assumption that we've been kind of going on, Mr. Morgan and I, hoping that the owner was going to, after Mr. Morgan was approved for his license, the owner would recognize the fact that they do have to finish these items to finish out their CCO. And, I think Mr. Morgan has also retained a lawyer, so I think this additional pressure we were hoping would get the ball moving with the owner.
But is there something we can do so he can start on Wednesday? or Francis?
Yeah, for the purpose of this discussion, so we've sort of found how the applicant is sort of in a rock and a hard place with the landlord. The planning department is sort of bound to, have a condition of approval that the chair has put forward that they resolve the open building permit, because under enforcement in the Chapter 13 in the enforcement section says no entitlement may be issued under this title unless all structures and uses the land structures permitted on this title conform to the title. So basically, the planning department, it has to have a condition of approval. Hey, you've got to clean up these other violations before you can be issued this new land use entitlement. So that's the derivation of the planning department's condition of approval. And this is really common in some old strip malls and things too, where, the tenant is not creating any violations, but the landlord or the property owner may have some existing, and so then the tenant gets sort of squeezed in the situation because the landlord may be like, well, maybe if I drop this tenant, then all this stuff will go away, and I'll just put in somebody else that doesn't require a building permit or something. So, what the assembly may consider is, striking planning department's condition of approval, and that would allow, it sounds like, the applicant to proceed with, trying to get their license and opening. But yeah, there's some bigger picture building violation issues that seem really simple and trivial that the landlord will have to resolve or have that discussion with code enforcement. But I just wanted to illustrate that the planning departments will always be having this condition of approval to resolve these violations, because we just kind of have to. We can't just say overlook it and then, because this is where we catch these issues, right? And you correct me if I'm wrong in anything I say.
No, that's correct. I mean, even if Mr. Morgan wasn't coming for, seeking a cultivation license, this is still outstanding.
So were he not involved, did you become aware that this has not been taken care of, you would have code enforcement working with this saying, all your people get out, you're shutting it down, 8/31.
Right.
So were we to remove these conditions in our approval, he could open up on Wednesday, start operating on Wednesday, and the landlord still has that pressure because he could have to leave on September 1 if the CCO, if he doesn't meet the conditions, the landlord doesn't meet the conditions. So you'd have 2 months. Yeah.
be, this is what I believe, he will do these things. If he got a letter from planning department stating that they were gonna shut down all 4 buildings, if he didn't do these, because all of these issues were, he built the 4th building, and all these were requirements because to allow him to build the 4th building. And he built the 4th building, and then he just didn't do anything. It took him 2 years to pave it, and now it's took him another 2 years to stripe it. And these are things that they're minuscule compared to some things, but I don't believe I agree. He thinks that if I just left, that he doesn't have to do these things, and I've been told that he has to do these things regardless. But I don't know why I'm put in the middle and delayed in my business. I would like to open up just as soon as possible.
And you're not alone. I mean, the next case we look at has something similar. We looked at many that have similar issues, so we can form a club.
I would like to believe that Johnny will, I believe Johnny will follow
So, what do you guys want to do? That's so if condition 6 were removed, we still have a sensible process to get the work done.
If there's a code enforcement action pending, it's the difficult thing for the planning department is there is a different office. It used to be that code enforcement was part of the planning department. So the planning department had long-range planning, it had transportation planning, it had current planning, it had code enforcement. Code enforcement is its own sort of office. It's not part of the planning department. I can't speak for Jack Frost, but they have a section in Title 21. They have their rules. They have this legal sort of lengthy process that they follow to try and bring properties in conformance. They open up a case. They go out and speak with the owner. The owner doesn't do what they're supposed to do. They give them a letter. They give them several letters. It's for most property owners, they after that initial discussion, they come into conformance. But there's always those folks that just sort of drag it on or never come into conformance. But I don't know if there's an open case with code enforcement, and I can't say that they're gonna. I can only assume that they're going to do their jobs and follow up on these issues if there's a case pending.
So we want to
I want to move to approve this, but I don't want to change the requirement. I want to put pressure on the person that owns this building.
So you want to leave this?
We'll leave this on there. Let him work with his attorney. I'm more than active, let the guy have permission to operate his cultivation.
But you want it, if 6 is on there, you won't be able to open if 6 is on there.
It would put some more pressure on the building owner. Because otherwise, it looks like this guy's got to keep trying to skate and not do anything.
Mr. Chair, the condition number 6 would have to be met in order for the applicant to record his notice of zoning action, get his final inspection, and then get his license and special use permit. So when we say get approved on Tuesday, open on Wednesday, even if you were to strike that condition,
He still can open on
it
Wednesday.
still takes about a week to get all the paperwork pushed through.
I realize that.
So,
Well,
This
that
could
was
be-
me, but even that week would be nice.
right, I mean, a week sure beats 2 months.
August 31st. The way I'm reading, he could wait till August 31st.
One more comment. There is the license renewal. I don't know if that's another avenue to have a backstop or meaning second bite of the apple. If next year around this time they don't come into compliance, then our applicant for marijuana business here could still be in jeopardy at that point if they're still out of conformance. I don't know if that's captured by this. That's kind of a question I have. The clerk's office. I don't know if you guys could speak to that now or.
So that is part of the review for the renewals. But Ryan was right in that it would have to be resolved for the clerk's office to actually issue their license to operate. That's one of the departmental reviews that we have to get certification from the fire department, fire marshal, that the CO or the CCO is good and we are able to issue.
So what you're saying, Mandy, is that if you strike the condition, then they can record the notice of zoning action plan, but they won't be issued a license by the clerk's office until these code violations are resolved. So that's sort of outside the Assembly's control. This is going to be resolved before the applicant can open his business.
These will run into and still crop up.
I've leased buildings myself a few times over the years that needed a considerable amount of work before I was able to get open. Maybe you could make the gentleman an offer to do these improvements yourself as credit towards your future rent. Just a suggestion to try to move it forward somehow. I mean, some people are just, career procrastinators, and they're not gonna spend a dime until they're absolutely required to.
Forced to.
Yeah, that's just, they're out there.
I believe a little positive reinforcement from planning and or assembly and or these people in writing that I could proceed to go to the owner, eyeball to eyeball, and hand him this and say, my attorney's gonna talk to you if you're delaying my opening, that I believe the owner will do the things on this list. But I believe right now, he's just listening to me, and this has been since October that I've been going through planning and my permitting and all of these things, trying to get him to do some of this stuff, and then it was the snow, and then it was and if we don't watch out, it's gonna happen again, and there's gonna be snow, and it's worked for him in the past, and, he's not going to do something unless he sees something in writing that, I better do it, or it's gonna cost me more money than what it's gonna cost me to get it done.
And I think the planning department could help you with a letter. It sounds like they're sort of building permit related issues, sort of outside of planning's role, but I think to try and break the logjam and provide good customer service, I think that we could provide a simple letter. Now, it's not the same as something coming from code enforcement or whatever, but I think to try and help you out, I think a letter could, we could probably, try and assist with that.
Okay, so we had a motion to recommend approval with the conditions as are stated here. Second? Sure. Felix, you're quiet. Okay, any opposition? Okay, so we'll recommend approval with all those conditions on there, so I hope we can work out. Correct. Sorry for your
Thank you very much.
Okay, so next up is Catalyst.
Wait till the subdivision guy wants one.
Okay, your name again?
I'm William Schneider.
Chris, the currently has marijuana shop in your area.
Mandy?
So this is a retail for Catalyst Cannabis Company. There were, all of the licensing requirements were addressed in their operating plan. There was past due accounts found with AWU for 2 of the licensees or affiliates. I haven't received notice back from her yet that it's been taken care of.
Okay.
So if you'll get me either a receipt or I'll email her.
Yeah, I know one of the members sent his payment in, so I don't know how he gets the receipt for that, so I'll work on getting that one, and I have the other one.
Okay, perfect. And then there was no, other than the taxes, fees, and fines, there was no other recommended conditions for the license. We did receive a notice of transfer for the applicant, and so this will be one that you will see coming before you for a transfer of controlling interest ownership. Eventually, we are processing those right now, and the state, I believe, is still working on their process.
Okay, so, because you're 57%, you've got 7 part of it essentially.
Yeah, I was 57%, and now we just transferred, and now I'm at 30%. That triggers a change in control and interest in terms of the state and the community, how they view that, and so we have to transfer of ownership.
And so, Mandy, we just worked out the rules on this, so I guess I should know, but, so they do that, but we don't really, what's our involvement there? You just inform us, don't you?
So, the controlling interest will go before the assembly. So you will see
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The applicant, William Schneider of Broken Dirt LLC, doing business as Catalyst Cannabis Company, is applying for a special land use permit for a marijuana retail sales establishment with a total of approximately 1,850 square feet of to-be licensed retail space. The establishment will be occupying a unit within a commercial strip mall within an I-1 district located on the northwest corner of Old Seward Highway and East 100th Avenue. It's right in the same commercial strip mall as the Roma Cafe. This proposed retail location will be operating in conjunction with the previously approved marijuana special land use permit, Catalyst Cannabis Company cultivation that was approved through Assembly Resolution 2016-247. And Catalyst Cannabis Company's cultivation facility is located at 5001 Eagle Street in Midtown. The proposed site lacks compliance, landscaping, pedestrian access, and sufficient turning and maneuvering space throughout the entirety of the parking area. To address these issues, staff has placed conditions 7 and 10 on the Assembly Resolution. Additionally, as of the writing of the staff packet, the petitioner had not applied for a change of use permit with Development Services. This is addressed in condition 8 of the Assembly Resolution. Lastly, because this commercial development utilizes parking on 4 separate lots, staff has added condition 9 on the Assembly Resolution, which requires the petitioner to enter into a parking agreement with the municipality. Provided site plans do not show any major alterations to the building facade or structure that would make it of similar character, scale, or size when compared to surrounding structures. And the planning department recommends approval of the special land use permit is subject to the conditions as stated in the staff report.
Thank you. Any thoughts? I did notice, let's jump out to me for some reason, the store size, you said 1850 on page 5, it says 2060.
Yeah, I think that's the rentable space, you know, with the interior walls versus the exterior walls, how it's measured. If I understand that correctly, I think the rentable space is closer to 1850 on the actual interior of the building.
So that's the way the landlord including the width of the wall and all that stuff.
Well, the architect, I think, actually does his measurement. I think he's renting on the 1850.
Okay. I have some questions going back to the discussion we just had. So, as we lead into a unit, a strip mall, it's kind of similar to the other one, unit in a development. And there's some features on this property that aren't proper. Okay, so essentially the property owner has to go and make these things happen. And is he willing, the property owner willing to do this and able? Because you can't. Like the previous one.
We're
yourself-
negotiating some of the things. We're getting a non-conforming to see if we can address the landscaping. And that's one of these issues where it's like, well, this is an enforcement issue and how is it going to get enforced? You know, if he was brought into conformity in 1985 with the landscaping and let it die, you know, how does it get addressed with the municipality if he was enforcing the maintenance of the landscaping? But we are working with the landlord on those things and or non-conforming rights. So non-conforming letter. The landlords are pretty amenable though, everything's thus far. The parking agreement shouldn't be a problem. We just need to get signatures because they're out of state. The
applicant is just a lease in this building, and it's potentially very unfair to require them to hold their business up due to some insufficiencies on the site that the landlord not developed, or whether they've known that they needed to develop them, or whether they've ignored those is unclear. But again, it's just we can't ignore that, so that's why it's in the.
But they got a certificate of occupancy at some point, because everything that's been leased out, I'm very familiar with it, it's generally leased out, so they've been operating just fine for decades. So maybe their grandfather, we don't know, we can find out. Is that where we are?
Correct. That could be the situation. There's various assumptions I could make for this site that there is quite a bit of landscaping present, but it appears that maybe it just wasn't maintained over the years. I think that bushes die off and never replaced them. It's hard for me to say, but.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, yeah, I'm fairly familiar with this as well. I have a regular customer that Don Sports Car used to order lunch from me all the time, so I've been there from the time. And as I recall, there's not a whole lot of business. People park right in front of the businesses. But when those spaces are taken, they park in the area south of there. You can see on the picture on page 14. And during the wintertime, that actually ends up being an area where they push some of the snow. Where the lot off is down in the southern end. So depending on how much snow we get, some of those spots get taken up by a good pile of snow. That's at least what, as I recall, what had happened in the past.
I think it said they had plenty of parking.
Yeah,
Is it the same property owner from them?
La Roma owns the larger parking lot out there. So it's kind of really more of like just getting them to get a parking agreement with themselves is the main thing. But basically that's what triggers so many parking spots with them being a restaurant. But that's not a problem. La Roma's is very great to work with, so it's just getting signatures really.
Okay, good. So, is there a recommendation?
Yeah, I recommend approval.
I'll second.
Okay, we'll go forward to that.
Just one comment, we did have, and I don't know how far you guys looked at this application. Our community council, they would not, and this might be better addressed at the assembly level, but they wanted to approve our MOU because of the liability concerns on their behalf. And so I could address this at assembly level, but it's just a weird,
Right, I'm very familiar with that.
Yeah.
We've dealt with it with them. It's not really an issue, but it is with them.
Right.
The current board.
It's not an issue with us. And you attended that committee council meeting. I looked at the minutes.
Yeah, I've been to most of them, so.
So
sometimes
what was the
they adjourn
discussion?
before I get
Just-
there, but.
They were afraid of accepting liability if they did an MOU or something?
That Bayshore Platte Community Council board will make no resolution regarding anything because they are afraid that if something goes awry, they will be sued. And we talked to Darryl, attorney, and the attorney says this doesn't make sense.
I know.
But that's where they are. They are what they are. Well, they are what they are now, but as more members join community councils, you get new boards can run things differently. That's just what this long time we tried for.
It's not a big issue as far as something.
Well, in terms of us being good stewards, we want to be, then we kind of got dead-ended after I said, all right, well, let's figure out a resolution to address problems as they arise. And said, okay, well, we don't want to address that because we don't want to sign anything. It's like, well, that's kind of counterproductive to us being able to be a good neighbor.
Join the community council and keep going to meetings.
Yeah.
You could also, I think in their case, just don't call it a resolution or just call it a handshake agreement or something like that. And you get the same thing where you just create agendas because our community council has a boilerplate sheet and it just says, here's how we will communicate. It's really all it commits them to. So it would be nice if you did, if you brought that to them, just don't call it a resolution.
Right, it's more of a communication plan.
Yeah, just to the point, I'd just like to say that the applicant has done every possible, he's done his due diligence with the community council. He's got a community engagement report, so he is satisfied with that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you bringing that up. Okay, well, good, see you Tuesday.
It'd be quick assembly meeting on Tuesday. We go past 7:15, we're rolling. Hey, we got a 6:59 last meeting.
Chris and I are gonna start talking about that.
We and Chris have a great time.
Okay, so welcome, Jed. So we've got, speaking of Chris, we had a resolution encouraging the Marijuana Control Board people to give us some guidance on on-site consumption. Apparently they've done that. I haven't read what it is, but Jed will tell us. And I think just what I'd like to do is just say get a broad outline of how we'll move forward as a city developing our own rules. So can you tell us what the state's done?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So last week, the Marijuana Control Board did elect to put out for public comment a draft regulation to address on-site. This is, I think, the fourth iteration of it at this point. Our office is still in the process of formatting the draft, and we got to kind of run it by the Attorney General's office just to make sure that what we put out for public comment is going to pass legal muster and going to reduce delays on the back end after the comment period is closed. Minimum requirement is 30 days for public comment. The board elected to put this out for 60 days. It's possible after that 60-day period there will be an oral public hearing on this as well. But we're going to encourage the public to submit written comments during that 60-day period. That 60-day period will begin once we post it in the online public notice system, and we anticipate that's going to be probably early August. So regardless, this wasn't going to come before the Marijuana Control Board for their September meeting. The board knew that, so we're trying to take our time to do this the right way this time, since there have been so many bumps in the road in the past.
Hold on, Jed. Did you have a question?
September meeting, where's that going to be held at?
That one's in Nome.
Where are they going to address this at? This consumption issue? In Anchorage or some other part of the land?
I believe it will be in Anchorage at, don't hold me to it, but there should be an Anchorage meeting in November.
And that's the earliest they can address it.
Yeah, just because of that 60-day comment period. They can't address it during that 60-day comment period. That just needs to be reserved solely.
Because I've got a whole Clean Air Coalition wants to find you people I'm talking to.
Oh, they've talked to us already.
Oh, no, not good to here in Anchorage.
Okay. Well, you can remind them that once this is posted in the online public notice system, I would encourage them to post their comments and submit them through there, or through our office.
Are they looking at doing a different category for home rule municipalities like Anchorage and some of the others that are home rule municipalities that have no regulation relative to this? Or is the state looking at overriding local issues relative to this?
So I'll get into kind of a little bit of the substance of the draft. Unfortunately, I just can't provide you with an actual draft of it yet because we're still going through that format. We don't want to jump the gun on that. But so what does this include? This is an endorsement. This isn't a new license type. So this would be specifically for retail marijuana license types. They could apply for this on-site consumption endorsement that would allow for this. They would be required to submit plans for ventilation that have been signed and approved by a licensed engineer. The board does recognize that municipalities have dealt in various ways with no smoking ordinances, and so I think that they're generally interested in respecting that. And specifically, I think that they want to allow. I think it seems like they want to allow the municipalities to opt out of the smoking part of this, if that's what their local ordinance says. Products consumed on the premises must be purchased from the retail store at the time of consumption, and regulations would set a maximum amount to be purchased during a single transaction. Ventilation, an on-site consumption endorsement licensee must include a smoke-free area if they do have employees monitoring that area. So in other words, if they require an employee to monitor the area, they'd have to provide for facilities that are non-smoking for that employee. Applicable signage and warnings would have to be displayed in the consumption area. Those warnings and signage apply to that retail facility, but they'd have to have separate warnings and signage in the consumption area specifically. This does allow licensed retail facilities to have a separate building for on-site consumption. And I think the board contemplated allowing outdoor consumption areas. We just don't know what that will really look like. And then finally, establishments may not sell alcohol and tobacco. They can sell food products, and the board wasn't interested in restricting on-site entertainment for this. But some of the similarities in the regulations, similar to the way alcohol is regulated. You can't bring your own products to this on-site consumption facility. You have to purchase it at the retail establishment. So this is kind of like the bottle clubs issue, right? We don't allow bottle clubs. We won't let you bring your own bottle of vodka to the club or that sort of thing. I mentioned the 60-day public comment period. If the board makes substantive changes based on the public comment that they receive, it's going to have to go up to public comment again. So I think that the board is realistic on what the timeline is on this. Yeah, I'm happy to try to address any questions.
Yep.
How do they address the issue of employees that have to walk into a smoke-filled environment to make sure their health's not compromised?
Well, again, like I mentioned,
With gas masks or what?
yeah, they did. The draft regulation is going to say that they have to provide a separate smoke-free kind of viewing area for employees that will be monitoring this. So in other words, you'd have to
Employees
provide.
wouldn't have to walk through the smoke. Or how are you going to protect their health if they have to walk through the smoke?
I don't have an answer to that. I think that this draft contemplates, as I mentioned, providing for a separate segregated employee area that attempts to separate them, but I can't tell you on walking through a smoke-filled area.
Just for the record, Assemblyman Compton has joined us, and Pete and then Brad.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it could be possible for a video camera to be set up. An employee could monitor the smoking room via video camera. That way they would not be exposed to secondhand smoke. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to dive too much into hypotheticals, but I think that would generally, that would probably be a good comment to make.
Thank you.
Jed, will the regulations address discounts, like the idea of with alcohol, happy hour type thing?
Right. Actually, yes. Those would be prohibited. It is very similar to the alcohol. I don't have the specific language in front of me, but there is that language in this draft.
Chris?
Yeah, what I have heard on the previous question is that there, at least in one instance, a business intends to extend their space and put in a glass wall, basically so that you can't have visual contact without a camera or any other tool. Your staff that's managing the retail environment would be able to. Then they would have a reverse pressurized room so that the smoke moves the other way when the doors are opened. And so that's what I had heard. One vendor was planning.
I can comment that in terms of security, licensed premises are required to have the entire area covered with video surveillance cameras, and I think this on-site consumption area will also be included for security.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, as I recall, reading through this last night, they're not required to consume all of the marijuana that they buy on site. They're able to put it back in a resealed container and take it with them, if I remember correctly.
That's correct. And then any marijuana that is left behind would have to be destroyed by the licensee.
similar to the way that the municipality put together sort of an internal working group to, when the 2014 marijuana legalization passed, the municipality is working on that right now, and just to sort of identify where the municipality's at right now, and working in conjunction with this committee as the municipality moves forward, but to be ahead of the ball on this to make sure that we're in line with the state's timeline to be able to have something presented and be able to allow for public input.
So who's your committee?
It is similar to the folks that worked on the legalization. We have support from the municipal attorney's office, our assembly council, along with clerk's office and planning department so far.
In DHHS?
We have not, right now, the idea is to evaluate where we're at before we expand it to.
Who monitors, who's in charge of this, our smoke-free workplace?
DHHS.
That's the huge issue.
Yeah, and absolutely they'll be brought into the conversation.
And then your schedule for that, you're forming this now, starting out?
Yeah.
So-
Yeah, I mean, so we have just started beginning the works after July 14th meeting, and I anticipate we'll probably be next week.
So you'll meet next week, and then, so you'll do like you did before, that you'll come forward with some proposed
I
ordinance
don't-
that would create the rules.
Yeah, and I think at this point the conversation isn't necessarily about presenting policy, but to understand more where we're at this point and allow the policymakers to lead the conversation on that. But we potentially could offer sort of a menu of different opportunities to move forward.
And you'll be able to read the comments that Jeff gets. Because those will be similar to what we'll get when we put something
Yeah,
forward.
and that was something that we did with the municipalities legalization. We closely tracked the public comments that were coming in from the state's regulations, and we were able to understand where the sentiment was coming from the public.
Want to make sure that if they do come down to special endorsement, that goes through this process. Because as we have these different uses coming in, smoking, you're gonna get a lot of comments from the public, and I want to make sure they come to this committee, rather than just have a blanket name that's got a retail license, can have an endorsement to have a smoking facility there. I
Absolutely.
want to make sure Jonathan comes here.
Comes here to this committee, or do you mean more specifically?
To the assembly.
To the assembly.
And
Okay.
we can direct it here from the assembly. But I just want to make sure that it's not a blanket where anybody that's got a retail can do this if they want to. There needs to be a process for that.
It could be more complex than the regular license.
And that,
Well, I would add, sorry, that it would be, in my envision.
I think just downtown would be fine.
Yeah, I would go with that too, that it's like another license essentially, right? It seems to me that it's like another license, and that we have to be conscientious of that. We have manufacturing, we have the growing, we have the testing. It just seems like the retail is a separate license that we ought to be cognizant of.
You mean the on-site consumption?
Yeah,
This retail with this endorsement turns into basically a bar.
right, and so I
And
think
we
we
need to
need a
make sure
separate
the public
license.
is comfortable with where these are going into our community at.
I
I'd like to teach on downtown, but I'm really teaching.
And I like it, but I do think we need to contemplate a separate license
well,
section.
and so I think, one thing we, if I may, through the chair, one thing we tried to do with our licensing process was closely follow the state's process so that it wasn't too complicated. And so I think that is something we could take into consideration to have a municipal endorsement. So, and then like the state's calling it an endorsement, not a license. And so, but I think we'll make sure when we go through it and review this to present all those options.
Any other thoughts?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I actually don't think we should limit this to the downtown area. I believe that the downtown area is already, I'm serious, the Business
Saturated?
Association down there feels like they are being picked on, and if we limit this strictly to the downtown area, we're going to get considerable more pushback on this than if we allow this this endorsement to be, to be people to apply in other retail areas around the city. And I think it's actually unfair to people who have not located downtown to not allow them to apply for this particular endorsement.
Well, I'm thinking Mid Chugakia River. They don't have any.
We don't have anything in
I have lots in Midtown.
I'm with
Go
you.
another area.
Yeah, it was a joke. I don't support it being restricted.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Trainee stole my thunder. I was going to say we should just put this all in Shuyak Eagle River. But I do want to say that these sort of set of guidelines I think are a good place to start, and I'm looking forward to this process.
We set up, maybe we could go through and just get a sense of the industry. It works with anybody who's here, but Chris, do you want to have any thoughts on this?
Just, there's a lot of public comment going out. We had our meeting last night and we went over the regulations, so a lot of public comment. We're watching for when it comes out so that we can form a group and get our comments ready.
And we'll be lagging, so you'll hit them and then we'll work on it after. So
Right.
if you're able to keep up with our,
We're
with
doing
them, okay?
the best we can. We were in Fairbanks with AMCO, so we were there all 3 days. And it gets grueling.
But as far as our meetings and what's on the agenda, are you getting notified adequately to
Oh, yeah.
keep up with it? Do you have any thoughts on the future of retailers?
Yeah, and I think restricting it to a certain area is just kind of, unfair, just like married. And I mean, I don't know, that it's kind of a little confusing on if that's a joke or not. I mean,
It's a joke.
I understand, okay, because, it was actually, in the ADN article, it mirrored that sentiment. And so,
That's right.
it said, this is geared down towards downtown, the resolution is towards downtown. When you look at the resolution, it kind of says, in particular, there's a line in there about downtown. So, as following it from the industry, it's like, well, we have another facility that we're looking at and we're very interested in doing on-site consumption there. And we don't want to feel like we are in a position where we can't participate unless it goes through. So I think as an industry in a whole, we want to be able to have, and especially throughout the municipality, if our facility we're looking at is closer to the hotels. Well, we would love to be able to have, in Midtown, not downtown. And so we just want to make sure that is on the table right off the bat, that we don't want to be limiting things to downtown, and that it is Anchorage wide, that we'd be endorsing or having this on the table for us.
I would say, our resolution was not just focused on downtown,
Right.
but because Chris wrote it, it had that flavor in the whereases, because that's his area, and I think that led to the interpretation that it was only about downtown, and I think Dick was joking.
He was, and I would just add as the author, the reason I put that in there was because there is a broad argument going on downtown about restricted numbers of licenses, distance of separation, and also what do we do about public consumption. And so the intent to speak about the downtown was to let folks know that I'm listening, we're hearing them, and that we're going to come up with solutions. But there was zero intent to restrict it to the downtown, and that really was just a joke that I can't handle because.
Let me work around, we'll come back. Did you?
I am downtown, and I say we're working very solid with the downtown partnership, and Chris is on it.
Good.
I want to add quickly to that. Thank you very much for participating in the meeting. I heard from a number of downtown business owners after that meeting that they're much more confident after hearing from actual people rather than just the boogeyman in the room. So thank you very much.
Oh, I would just say, I'm JW5 from the Anchorage Downtown Partnership, so we're also monitoring this and echo what Chris said, that we do have a large concerned population among building owners, especially with clean air in parks and legal consumption. So this is something we're following. And really the main concern we had was also safe workplace stuff. So all that's being addressed and it's continuing to go on. We're having to support business in all of its forms downtown.
Good, thank you.
I just believe that we shouldn't have a blanket endorsement. Just because they have a retail store, many of these retail stores, I've been in all of them, doesn't have the space, the parking, I mean, it opens up a whole new gamut of problems that has to be readdressed rather than just an endorsement that, okay, because everybody who has a retail is going to want on-site consumption, but many of them aren't prepared. They didn't look at that when they went in. Some of them have. They had a plan from the beginning, so they have the room and the areas, and like Tara and Skagway with the outdoor and the 7-foot fence so people can't see in. I mean, there are people who have planned accordingly and are going forward the right way.
Thank you. Anything else? Pete?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I just think since video is required in all of these locations, it just makes sense that for health purposes, an employee could monitor this from a different room by looking at video. Maybe able to take advantage of modern technology. And so I think the secondhand smoke ordinance wouldn't need to be amended or changed if people were able to set that up that way. Some facilities that have retail licenses are not going to have room to create consumption area, but others have planned ahead and are in a much more advantageous situation for that. And and then maybe some people that have retail licenses now will go looking for different locations so that they can provide an on-site consumption. But I mean, this is in the early stages, and so I think a lot of input will come from the public and business people about this, and we'll just have to stay on top of it. Thank you.
Anything else? So just to wrap up then, you're going to spend a couple months, maybe more, doing the state stuff, and overlapping that, we're going to have a team looking at it, and it could be 3 to 5 months before we really hit a city municipal board meeting. Is that about right? Right in the middle of December.
3 to 5 months would be like the best case.